For millennia, China stood as the Middle Kingdom, a civilization of unparalleled grandeur, its emperors believed to rule by divine mandate. But by the mid-19th century, this ancient empire, seemingly immutable, found itself at a perilous precipice. External powers encroached with gunboats and demands, while internal rebellions tore at the very fabric of society. The glorious Qing dynasty, custodians of a 2,000-year imperial tradition, teetered on the brink of collapse. It was into this crucible of chaos and change that one woman, from the unlikeliest of origins, would step forward to seize destiny. From a secluded, hierarchical world of the imperial concubinage, a young woman named Cixi began her ascent. Through shrewd intellect, unyielding ambition, and masterful political maneuvering, she transcended her designated role to become the de facto ruler of China for nearly half a century. From behind a silken curtain, she would wield immense, often absolute, power, navigating an empire through its most tumultuous period. This documentary, spanning 36 comprehensive sections, unveils Cixi's remarkable journey, her cunning strategies to maintain control, her controversial decisions that ignited both fury and admiration, and her profound, often debated, legacy that echoes still today. Was she the architect of China's decline, or its desperate, final defender? Prepare to journey into the heart of the Forbidden City and uncover the untold story of the Empress behind the curtain. The mid-19th century, a vast empire, once the undisputed celestial kingdom, teetered on the brink. China, the mighty Qing dynasty, was a land scarred by internal strife and besieged by external forces. The devastating Taiping Rebellion, a civil war that would claim tens of millions of lives, tore through the southern provinces, while the Nian Rebellion further destabilized the north. Economically, the empire was bleeding, its coffers depleted by conflict and corruption. But the greatest humiliation came from without. The Opium Wars had shattered China's illusion of invincibility, forcing open its ports to Western merchants and missionaries, and carving out concessions that gnawed at its sovereignty. A proud civilization found itself increasingly at the mercy of foreign powers, its ancient traditions clashing violently with a rapidly modernizing world. This was the volatile, desperate landscape into which a young woman named Yahenira would rise, an empire in crisis awaiting a new kind of power. In this era of unprecedented turmoil, opportunity, particularly for women, was a lottery of fate. Our story begins not in the gilded halls of power, but in the relatively modest household of Yahenira. Born in 1835, she was a Manchu girl from the Yahenira clan, affiliated with the bordered blue banner, a respectable but by no means elite bannerman family. Her early life, though privileged compared to many, offered no hint of the monumental destiny that awaited her. Yet, within the Qing imperial system, every few years, eligible Manchu girls were presented for imperial concubine selection. It was a rigorous, often terrifying process, a chance lottery that could elevate a young woman from obscurity to the glittering, yet perilous, world of the Forbidden City. For Yahenira, this ancient tradition was not merely a rite of passage. It was the unexpected gateway to a power beyond imagination. Having passed the rigorous selection, Yahenira entered the Forbidden City in 1852, a world unto itself, governed by ancient protocols and unforgiving hierarchies. As a noble Lady Lawn, her initial rank was modest, placing her among hundreds of other women vying for attention within the vast imperial harem. Life here was a gilded cage. Endless rituals, strict etiquette, and the constant, unspoken struggle for the emperor's gaze. Every gesture, every word, was scrutinized. Trust was a luxury, loyalty a rare commodity. The Forbidden City, with its endless courtyards and intricate living quarters, could feel both infinitely grand and impossibly isolating. Survival depended on cunning, patience, and a deep understanding of human nature. For a young woman from a relatively humble background, Navigating this labyrinthine world was a test of character and an initiation into the ruthless game of power. Amidst the hundreds of women, each vying for imperial favor, Yahenira's path was far from guaranteed. The Xianfeng emperor, though young, carried the weight of a fracturing empire. He was often described as melancholic, increasingly detached, and prone to finding solace in opium and distractions. Yet, despite these challenges, Yahenira possessed a keen intellect and a captivating spirit that gradually distinguished her. She was not just beautiful. She was articulate, well-read, and understood the nuances of court politics. She spoke Manchu fluently, recited poetry, and offered insightful opinions on the emperor's burdens. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, this low-ranking concubine began to catch the emperor's weary eye, earning a rare spark of his attention, not just for her beauty, but for her mind and her understanding of his plight. This quiet connection would prove to be her first, crucial step onto a grander stage. Then, in 1856, came the moment that would irrevocably alter Yahenira's destiny and, indeed, the course of imperial China. She conceived, and on April 27, 1856, she gave birth to a son, Stateswoman, Emperor Xianfeng's only male heir. In a dynasty where male succession was paramount, this event was nothing short of miraculous. The birth of a prince instantly elevated Yahenira's status from a mere concubine to a consort, a rank of immense prestige. She was now the mother of the future emperor, securing her position within the imperial household and granting her unprecedented influence. Her son was the continuation of the Qing lineage, and through him, Yahenira found herself holding an unexpected, potent key to power in a world where she had once been just another face in the imperial crowd. With her son, Stateswoman, now the heir apparent, Yahenira's position was profoundly transformed. She was no longer confined to the traditional intrigues of the harem. As consort, and more importantly, as the emperor's only surviving son's mother, she gained unprecedented access and leverage. The increasingly ailing Xianfeng emperor, burdened by the empire's collapsing fortunes and his own declining health, began to rely on her. She moved beyond merely charming him. She started to advise him. She gained access to official state documents, reviewing memorials and offering her insights on matters of governance. From behind the silken curtain of the inner court, Yahenira was quietly, yet decisively, beginning to exert influence over state affairs, preparing herself for a role no woman had dared to openly claim in centuries. As Yahenira's influence grew, the empire continued its descent into chaos. Foreign pressures mounted relentlessly, culminating in a national humiliation that would forever scar the Qing dynasty. In 1860, the Anglo-French forces, enraged by Chinese resistance and the torture of their envoys, retaliated with brutal vengeance. They marched on Beijing and, in an act of staggering destruction, set ablaze the old summer palace, Yuanminjiwan, a sprawling masterpiece of imperial gardens and architecture, a symbol of China's cultural glory. The Emperor Xianfeng, already weakened, fled to Jihol, Rihe, his health and resolve shattered by this profound desecration. This period of unimaginable defeat and national shame solidified his physical and mental deterioration, creating an ever-widening power vacuum at the heart of the once mighty empire. The devastation of the summer palace was a blow from which Emperor Xianfeng would never recover. Away from the capital, in the summer retreat of Rihe, his health steadily worsened. His spirit, like the empire he governed, was broken. In August 1861, just a year after the destruction of Yuanminjiwan, the Xianfeng emperor died at the age of 30. His passing plunged the Qing dynasty into an immediate crisis of succession. His heir, Stateswoman, was a mere 5-year-old child, far too young to rule. In his dying wishes, the emperor had attempted to establish a regency council of 8 senior officials, hoping to secure the empire's future. But his decision inadvertently set the stage for a dramatic power struggle, one that would redefine the very nature of imperial rule. From behind the curtain, Cixi, the mother of the child emperor, was ready to step into the void. In the immediate aftermath of Emperor Xianfeng's death, a critical vacuum of power threatened to plunge the Qing dynasty into further chaos. His designated heir, the 5-year-old stateswoman, was too young to rule. In an unprecedented move, the late emperor's primary wife, Empress consort Xian, and his concubine, the emperor's birth mother, Yahenera, were named co-regents. Yahenera, now known as Empress Dowager Cixi, along with Xian, was tasked with governing from behind a curtain, a potent symbol of female authority in a world traditionally dominated by men. This unique arrangement meant that while the child emperor was presented to officials, the true power, the discussions, and the decisions flowed from the two women veiled from direct view, forever altering the landscape of imperial rule in China. The transition to regency was far from smooth. Emperor Xianfeng, on his deathbed, had also appointed a council of 8 powerful Manchu officials, known as the 8 regents, to assist the young emperor. These men, steeped in tradition, viewed the female regents with suspicion and intended to marginalize their influence. But Cixi, with Xian's crucial support, was not to be sidelined. In the autumn of 1861, in a swift and decisive political maneuver known as the coup of Xinyo, they struck. Key loyalists were rallied. The 8 regents were arrested, stripped of their power, and some were even executed. This audacious act solidified the dowager's control and signaled Cixi's formidable political acumen, marking her true emergence from the shadows as a force to be reckoned with. With the 8 regents removed and their authority firmly established, Cixi and Xian now faced the immense task of governing a vast, ailing empire. Their first major initiative was the Tongji Restoration, named after the new young emperor. This ambitious period aimed not merely at stability, but at revitalizing the Qing dynasty itself. It was a complex endeavor, simultaneously focused on quelling the devastating internal rebellions that had plagued China for years and adopting cautious modernization efforts to counter foreign encroachments. The two empresses dowager, navigating a landscape of urgent crises and ingrained conservatism, sought to project an image of renewed imperial strength, even as the foundations of the empire continued to tremble beneath their feet. The most immediate and critical challenge of the Tongji Restoration was the suppression of the widespread internal uprisings. The devastating Taiping Rebellion, a millenarian movement that had ravaged southern China for over a decade, along with the Nian Rebellion in the north and various Muslim rebellions in the west, threatened to tear the empire apart. Under Cixi and Xian's regency, regional Han Chinese generals like Zheng Wufan, Li Hongzhang, and Zhuo Zongtong were empowered with modern armies and resources. They eventually crushed these formidable threats, securing the empire's territorial integrity. However, these victories came at an immense cost in lives and resources, and inadvertently shifted significant military and fiscal power away from the central Qing court towards these increasingly autonomous provincial leaders. Recognizing China's severe technological and military backwardness in the face of Western aggression, Cixi cautiously endorsed the self-strengthening movement. This initiative, largely spearheaded by the same Han generals who crushed the rebellions, aimed to adopt Western military technology and industrial methods while meticulously preserving traditional Confucian values and the fundamental structure of Imperial China. It was a pragmatic approach, summarized by the slogan, Chinese learning as the essence, Western learning for practical application. Arsenals, shipyards, and modern factories sprang up, and students were even sent abroad. Yet, Cixi's support, while crucial, was always tempered by a deep-seated conservative streak, ensuring that the pace of reform remained slow and often superficial. Even as China grappled with internal strife and nascent modernization, the aggressive encroachment of Western powers remained a constant and pressing threat. The regency under Cixi and Xian was forced to navigate a new and deeply unfavorable world order. To handle this unprecedented diplomatic challenge, the Zhongli Yamen, China's first official foreign office, was established. This institution represented a significant departure from centuries of isolationist policies, engaging directly with foreign legations and attempting to negotiate China's place in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. Yet, despite these efforts, China often found itself at the mercy of unequal treaties and gunboat diplomacy, highlighting the immense disparity in power and the precarious position of the Qing Empire. Despite supporting aspects of the self-strengthening movement and the Zhongliyamen, Cixi remained deeply rooted in conservative Manchu traditions. Her pragmatism, born of necessity, often clashed with her ingrained traditionalism, leading to significant internal conflicts within the Qing court. Powerful officials formed factions, debating the pace and scope of modernization. How much Western influence was too much? Could China adopt foreign technology without sacrificing its soul? Cixi, ever the astute politician, carefully balanced these opposing forces, often playing one faction against another. Her decisions reflected a cautious nature, always prioritizing the stability of the Manchu dynasty over radical change, a stance that would have profound and often contradictory consequences for China's future. After 12 years, in 1873, the Tongji Emperor, now 18, formally came of age and assumed the reins of power, marking the official end of the Dowager's regency. It was a momentous occasion, symbolizing China's hope for a young, vigorous ruler. Yet, this highly anticipated personal reign proved to be tragically brief and largely ineffective. The young emperor, who had lived his entire life under the shadow of his powerful mother, struggled to assert his own authority. Cixi, having wielded immense power for over a decade, found it difficult to relinquish control entirely. Her influence remained a powerful undercurrent, subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, guiding court decisions and overshadowing her son's attempts to rule independently. The stage was set for a continued struggle for ultimate authority. Just 2 years after assuming full power, a shadow fell over the Forbidden City. In 1875, the young Tongji Emperor, Cixi's own son, died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, it was smallpox, a common killer in Imperial China, but whispers of venereal disease, contracted from illicit excursions outside the palace walls, circulated amongst the court. His sudden demise plunged the dynasty into another profound succession crisis, an unforeseen void of power that immediately presented Cixi with a renewed opportunity. The once frail Empress Dowager, who had seemingly taken a back seat, now had an open path to reclaim the reins. The court, still reeling from the emperor's unexpected death, watched as the stage was once more set for Cixi to assert her formidable will, ready to navigate the political vacuum to her advantage, a grim determination etched upon her face. With no direct heir to Tongji, traditional succession laws dictated that a new emperor be chosen from a younger generation, ensuring generational continuity. This meant picking an adult, or at least an older child, who could eventually assume control. But Cixi had no intention of relinquishing her hard-won authority. In a move that brazenly defied centuries of Qing precedent and shocked the Imperial clan, she handpicked her own 3-year-old nephew, Zaiqian, from a different generation, to ascend the dragon throne. Zaiqian, renamed the Guangxu Emperor, was too young to rule, perfectly guaranteeing Cixi's continued regency. This audacious maneuver, an act of sheer political will, solidified her position, once again proving her unmatched ability to bend the rules of a patriarchal society to her own formidable advantage. From a moment he was plucked from his parents' arms at the tender age of 3, the young Guangxu Emperor's life was dictated by Cixi. Raised under her strict, often overbearing, tutelage, his childhood was a solitary existence, devoid of the warmth of parental affection. Instead, it was filled with rigorous imperial lessons, the constant pressure of duty, and the chilling awareness of his unique, yet controlled position. Cixi, ever the ultimate authority, shaped his every move, his every thought. This upbringing, a gilded cage designed to foster dependence, indelibly molded his character. Reserved, intelligent, yet deeply insecure. It forged a complex, often strained relationship with his aunt, a shadow that would loom large over his entire reign, sowing the seeds of future conflict and resentment within the heart of the Qing court. For years, Cixi had shared the regency with her co-empress dowager, Cixi. Though their temperaments differed, Cixi embodying tradition and Cixi ambition, their partnership had been a delicate balance of power. But in 1881, the balance shattered. Empress Dowager Cixi died suddenly, her passing officially attributed to illness. Yet, in the labyrinthine corridors of the Forbidden City, rumors immediately began to circulate, dark whispers of foul play and Cixi's involvement. While historical evidence remains inconclusive, the timing was undeniably convenient. With Cixi gone, Cixi was now the sole, undisputed power behind the throne, her path to absolute control cleared of its last major obstacle. The silence that followed Cixi's death was as heavy as the secrets it held, leaving Cixi supreme, a solitary figure at the pinnacle of Qing power. By 1889, the Guangxu emperor had come of age. The time had arrived for Cixi to formally relinquish her regency. With much pomp and imperial fanfare, she announced her retirement, moving from the Forbidden City to the magnificent summer palace, Yihiyuan. On the surface, it appeared to be a dignified transition, a passing of the torch to the young emperor. But this was merely a carefully orchestrated facade. Cixi, ever the master manipulator, maintained ultimate control. Key appointments, major policy decisions, military matters, all still flowed through her, often with subtle directives or direct commands issued from her luxurious lakeside retreat. Her retirement was a strategic repositioning, not a surrender of power, proving that even in ostensible retreat, her grasp on China remained ironclad, a silken curtain merely disguising the hand that still pulled all strings. Cixi's retirement was spent overseeing a project of immense scale and breathtaking luxury, the comprehensive rebuilding of the summer palace, Yihiyuan. Destroyed by Anglo-French forces in 1860, its reconstruction became her personal passion project. Grand halls, ornate temples, vast gardens, and a stunning marble boat. No expense was spared in creating this imperial paradise. Yet, this magnificent undertaking came at a colossal cost to a nation already struggling. Allegations, substantiated by historical records, suggest that funds desperately needed for the modernization of China's nascent navy, a critical defense against rising foreign threats, were shamelessly diverted to satisfy Cixi's aesthetic desires. This became a searing point of criticism, a potent symbol of her perceived selfishness and the Qing dynasty's misplaced priorities in an age of urgent national peril. The opulent serenity of the summer palace masked a grim reality. China was unprepared for the modern world. In 1894, this stark truth was brutally exposed with the outbreak of the Sino-Japanese War. What was expected to be a swift Chinese victory turned into a humiliating, devastating defeat. Japan, a newly industrialized Asian power, utterly overwhelmed Qing forces, both on land and at sea. The war shattered any lingering illusions of China's regional dominance, revealing the catastrophic failure of the self-strengthening movement to truly modernize its military. By 1895, China had lost Korea, its long-standing tributary state, and was forced to cede Taiwan to Japan. This colossal defeat, a national trauma, not only plunged China in a deeper crisis, but also signaled to the world that the ancient empire was weak and ripe for exploitation. The devastating defeat in the Sino-Japanese War acted as a brutal siren call to the world's imperial powers. China's inherent weakness, exposed for all to see, triggered a voracious scramble for concessions. Western nations, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, along with the newly ascended Japan, descended upon the ailing Qing Empire like vultures. They carved up China into vast spheres of influence, demanding exclusive economic rights, railway concessions, and control over crucial ports. Shandong, Manchuria, the Yangtze Valley, each fell under the sway of a foreign power, effectively diminishing Qing sovereignty and turning China into a semi-colonial state. The once proud empire, unable to defend itself, watched helplessly as its territory and autonomy were systematically eroded. The future of China, fractured and vulnerable, hung precariously in the balance, a pawn in a larger global game. By the late 19th century, China was a giant struggling to stand, its ancient bones rattling under the weight of foreign encroachment and internal decay. Alarmed by the accelerating decline, the young Guangxu emperor, now nearing 27, resolved to steer the empire onto a new course. Inspired by radical Confucian scholars like Kang Yue and Liang Qichao, Guangxu launched an ambitious program of institutional change in 1898, the 100 Days Reforms. He issued decree after decree, aiming to modernize China's education, military, economy, and even its government bureaucracy, replacing archaic systems with Western models. It was a desperate, unprecedented gamble, a direct challenge to centuries of tradition, and an undeniable threat to the established power structures that Empress Dowager Cixi had so meticulously cultivated. For Cixi, these reforms were more than just policy changes. They were a frontal assault on her authority, her family's Manchu traditions, and the very foundation of Qing rule. The speed and scope of Guangxu's decrees, bypassing the usual channels, signaled his intent to rule independently. She would not allow it. In a swift and brutal counter-coup on September 21, 1898, Cixi reasserted her absolute power. With the loyal Ronlu and his northern army at her command, she moved decisively. The emperor was immediately stripped of his power and placed under house arrest in the secluded Ocean Terrace, a gilded prison within the Forbidden City. Leading reformers were hunted down. 6 prominent figures, including Tan Sidong, were executed without trial. The 100 days of reform ended abruptly, submerged in a tide of blood and fear, Cixi's iron grip once again unquestioned. The counter-coup sealed Guangxu's fate. From that autumn day in 1898 until his death a decade later, the Son of Heaven remained effectively a prisoner within his own palace. Confined to the small, isolated island of Yingtai, or Ocean Terrace, within the Forbidden City's West Lake, Guangxu lived a life of gilded misery. He was allowed minimal contact with the outside world, his every movement monitored, his once-burning ambition extinguished by forced idleness and humiliation. His voice, once powerful enough to challenge an empire, was silenced. This wasn't merely a political maneuver. It was a profound personal tragedy and a stark demonstration of Cixi's unwavering control. His isolation symbolized the definitive end of any hope for independent imperial rule and left Cixi as the undisputed, unchallenged mistress of China's destiny. As Cixi solidified her control, a different, far more volatile force was simmering in the Chinese countryside. Decades of humiliation, foreign exploitation, poverty, and aggressive Christian missionary activity had ignited a furious anti-foreign sentiment. This resentment coalesced into a powerful, violent movement known as the Boxers, or Yehechuan, the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists. They believed themselves invulnerable to foreign bullets through ritualistic practices and martial arts. Their fury was indiscriminate. They targeted foreign missionaries, their Chinese converts, and anyone perceived as aligning with Western influence. Across North China, churches were burned, railways destroyed, and innocent lives lost in a wave of xenophobic rage. China was a tinderbox, and the Boxers were its volatile spark, threatening to ignite an international conflagration. The emergence of the Boxers presented Cixi with her greatest dilemma yet. Her court was deeply divided. Some, like the powerful Prince Qing, urged caution and appeasement of the foreign powers, fearing devastating retaliation. Others, fueled by deep-seated anti-foreign sentiment and perhaps an opportunistic desire to harness the Boxers' energy, pushed for supporting the uprising. Cixi, ever the pragmatist, initially wavered, torn between protecting her dynasty from international retribution and channeling this potent surge of Chinese nationalism. But the Boxer's rhetoric resonated with her own xenophobia, and she saw a desperate opportunity to finally drive the foreign barbarians from China's shores. In June 1900, she made the fateful, catastrophic decision to formally back the Boxers, issuing an imperial decree declaring war on all foreign powers. It was a gamble of epic proportions, betting the very future of the Qing dynasty on a populist, mythical movement. Cixi's declaration of war unleashed an unprecedented wave of violence. With imperial sanction, the Boxers, joined by elements of the Qing army, descended upon Beijing's foreign legation quarter. For 55 harrowing days, from June 20th to August 14th, 1900, diplomats, missionaries, and their families, approximately 900 foreigners and 3,000 Chinese Christians, were besieged within the fortified compounds. Cut off from the outside world, they faced relentless attacks, starvation, and the constant fear of extermination. This audacious assault on international diplomatic envoys galvanized the world. News of the siege, often exaggerated, sparked outrage across Europe, America, and Japan. It was a direct challenge to the international order and an unprovoked attack that demanded a full-scale, devastating military intervention. The international community responded with brutal efficiency. An 8-nation alliance, comprising forces from Japan, Russia, Britain, the U.S., France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, assembled a formidable expeditionary force. As the Allied troops marched on Beijing, the Boxers' mystical invincibility proved a cruel illusion. On August 14, 1900, the alliance broke through Beijing's gates. In a moment of profound humiliation, Empress Dowager Cixi, along with the incapacitated Guangxu Emperor and much of the imperial court, was forced to flee the capital in disguise. Dressed as peasants, they embarked on a desperate, arduous journey westward to Xi'an. The supreme ruler of China, fleeing her own capital from foreign invaders, underscored the utter failure of her gamble and the dynasty's precipitous decline. The Dragon Lady was on the run. The Boxer Rebellion concluded with the most devastating and humiliating of all the unequal treaties, the Boxer Protocol, signed in September 1901. Its terms were crushing. China was forced to pay an astronomical indemnity of 450 million silver taels, equivalent to roughly $333 million at the time, payable over 39 years, a staggering sum that crippled the national economy. Foreign troops were granted permanent garrisons in Beijing and along the railway lines, and China was forbidden from importing arms for 2 years. Moreover, numerous high-ranking anti-foreign officials were punished, exiled, or executed. This protocol was not just a financial burden. It was a profound symbol of China's utter subjugation to foreign powers. The Qing dynasty, though technically still in power, had been irrevocably weakened, its sovereignty shattered, and its legitimacy severely compromised. The stage was set for its final, inevitable collapse. The Empress Dowager's return to Beijing in early 1902 was not the triumphant procession of a sovereign, but a somber journey through the ruins of her empire. The wounds of the Boxer uprising and the humiliation of the Boxer Protocol were starkly visible in the capital. Having fled in terror, living for over a year in the rustic confines of Xi'an, Cixi had witnessed China's fragility firsthand. She had experienced the raw, undeniable power of foreign armies and the devastating cost of her resistance. This was a profoundly changed woman. The insular, conservative regent who had ruthlessly suppressed Emperor Guangxu's 100 Days reforms now returned with a renewed, almost desperate understanding. If the Qing dynasty was to survive, it had to adapt. The time for gradualism was over. Radical transformation, once anathema, was now the only path forward. From 1901, even before her return, and accelerating dramatically upon it, Cixi initiated what became known as the New Policies, a breathtakingly ambitious program of reforms. This was no mere tinkering. It was a wholesale overhaul of the imperial system. The ancient, millennia-old civil service examination system, the bedrock of Chinese governance, was abolished in 1905, replaced by modern schools and universities. The military was completely reorganized, establishing Western-style armies and naval academies. Legal codes were reformed, promising a fairer judiciary, and perhaps most astonishingly, imperial delegations were dispatched abroad to study constitutional governments, hinting at a future where even the Qing monarchy might share power. These were the very reforms for which she had imprisoned Guangxu, now championed by the Empress Dowager herself, revealing a pragmatic genius that prioritized survival above all else. As the monumental new policies unfolded, so too did the final act of Empress Dowager Cixi's extraordinary life. By 1908, her health, though robust for her years, began to visibly decline. Her long reign, marked by unprecedented upheaval and immense personal power, was drawing to a close. Conscious of the precarious state of the Qing dynasty and the critical need for a stable succession, she made her final, pivotal decisions. She designated her grandnephew, the 2-year-old Puyi, as the new emperor, appointing Puyi's father, Prince Xifeng, as regent. But history held one more chilling twist. On November 15, 1908, Cixi succumbed to illness. Yet, just one day prior, on November 14, the long-imprisoned Guangxu emperor had also died. Two deaths, so close together, cast a long, ominous shadow over the imperial court and raised immediate, troubling questions. The sudden, almost simultaneous deaths of Emperor Guangxu and Empress Dowager Cixi ignited a firestorm of speculation that has persisted for over a century. While Cixi's passing was attributed to age and illness, Guangxu's demise, after years of perceived chronic illness, was suspiciously abrupt. Had Cixi, fearing her own imminent death, decided to eliminate the emperor she had effectively imprisoned for a decade? Many historians believe she feared Guangxu would reclaim power upon her death, perhaps reversing her new policies or, even worse, seeking retribution against those loyal to her. Modern scientific analysis, conducted in 2008, confirmed high levels of arsenic in Guangxu's remains, conclusively proving he was poisoned. The evidence strongly points to a deliberate act, and while no definitive proof links it directly to Cixi, the timing, her character, and the stakes involved paint a grim picture of Imperial China's final, desperate power plays. Empress Dowager Cixi's 5-decade reign was undeniably a period of profound upheaval, a desperate, often bloody, resistance against an encroaching world punctuated by belated, hesitant attempts at reform. From the anonymous existence of a mere concubine, she rose through sheer force of will and intellect to become the ultimate power behind China's imperial throne, ruling from behind the mythical curtain. Her story is one of survival, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to a dying dynasty she believed she alone could preserve. Her legacy, however, remains as fiercely debated today as it was during her lifetime. To some, she was the ruthless dragon lady, a xenophobic autocrat whose conservative policies and personal extravagance hastened China's inevitable collapse and sealed the fate of the Qing. To others, she was a pragmatic survivor, a formidable stateswoman who, despite overwhelming odds, courageously tried to steer a colossal, yet fragile, empire through impossible times. Cixi's choices, her triumphs, and her failures undeniably shaped the agonizing transition from imperial China to the modern era, irrevocably setting the stage for the tumultuous 20th century. Ultimately, Empress Dowager Cixi embodied the profound complexities of a once mighty nation struggling to reconcile its ancient, sacred past with an undeniable, unforgiving future, leaving behind a paradox that continues to captivate and challenge our understanding of power, survival, and destiny.